Hi, I'm Rich Forfa from Maryland. I've been an equine veterinarian since 1980. I've worked with a variety of different horses, race horses, dressage, hunters, jumpers, pleasure, driving horses, and mules and donkeys and minis. So, I've kind of seen a lot. Um, I feel that I'm a CDE competitor, and I may not be any expert in training, but I know that many people on the line here have trained many, many more horses than I. But I am giving you this information from the veterinarian's perspective, problems that I kind of see with my clients, be whatever sport that they're doing. And I always feel that whenever you're having a problem conditioning your horse for whatever sport is, don't be afraid to talk to your trainer and your veterinarian. And I guess what we're going to do here tonight is a little poll on how many people who are in attendance have competed in a CDE event. If you would just fill out the questionnaire.
All right, we'll give everybody a few minutes to get their answers in there, and then we're going to close it, and we can see how many people we have on that are CDE competitors and who's just getting started. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the results. So we have 59% of the people that responded are CDE competitors, and 41% aren't yet. We're hoping that this presentation helps you out and helps you get started. Great.
And I guess our second question is going to be, of those who are CDE competitors, what level you have been competing at or aspire to be competing at.
I've launched that poll. You should be seeing that one now. So you can respond training, preliminary, or intermediate, or advanced. And we'll let everybody take a moment to vote on that one. I'm going to close that poll, and then I'll share the results with everybody. So that's great. We have 64% of the people on tonight are in the training category. We got 36 in prelim and 14 in intermediate and a few more in advanced. That's really great. All right, we'll go back to Rich's presentation now.
Okay, I guess talking about conditioning, I think it takes a little bit of a measure of common sense and knowing your horse. You have to look at the horse, whether he's, a draft, a thoroughbred, Arab quarter horse, warm blood pony, mini. I think you have to look at them as what are you expecting them to do, their size, and their training level and things like that. So you have to start looking at what individual animal you have and start with making a plan from there. So as far as conditioning your horses, I think the most important thing is thinking about monitoring its heart and respiratory rates. And if people want to do this when you're training your horse, a lot of times if your horse is hooked up to a carriage, it's nice to have an assistant to help you, either the groom that's riding on a carriage or somebody that's standing at a designated point where you'd like to take the heart rate and respiratory rate. And it's very, very simply done by buying a cheap stethoscope. You can get them at Walmart, CVS, any drugstore for $20, $25, and they're probably more than adequate. And I show two photos up here. The one on the right shows where you can auscultate for the heart, and you can count the number of beats per minute, but you don't have to really do it over a minute. You can put your stethoscope on the chest and count over a period of 15 seconds and multiply by 4, and that'll give you your heartbeats per minute. You usually, if the horse is in harness, can just put that stethoscope in front of the girth and behind the elbow, kind of maybe a hand breadth below the above the sternum. And the other way of taking a heart rate, would be with the pulse method, would be putting your finger. There's a picture on the left lower hand side of the screen that shows you where you would put your finger up against the bottom of the horse's jawbone, just in front of that kind of throat latch. Strap on that halter, and you can gently compress the vein against the bone and count the pulses as it moves through that vein and artery. So that method is a little bit difficult for some people, so I recommend the stethoscope method. And as far as listening to respiratory rates, I think the simplest way is to use the stethoscope and put that stethoscope on the trachea or the windpipe and just count the breaths over 15 seconds. You also can watch the movements in the horse's flank or the flaring of the horse's nostrils to count the respiratory rate. Whichever you become comfortable with is a way of getting started in analyzing this heart and respiratory rate. As I said, you can get a stethoscope very, very cheaply, and some people elect to go with heart rate monitors, which are very nice in a horse which is out on a cross-country course. You don't have to stop. You can monitor the horse's heart rate as you're going along, and you can see trends and record them on the little computer and come back and look at them later. Most of the most popular ones are made by the Polar Company. You can find them online, but the prices vary from, I would say at this point in time, $300 to near $1,000, depending upon the heart rate monitor you buy. So I'm not going to recommend them, but it really depends upon how deep your pocketbook is and how sophisticated you want to be in knowing your information. Okay, so when we start out training, I think the most important thing is to think about beginning with long, slow distance. I think you can take any horse who's been laid off over the winter and take him for a walk. 60 minutes, 30 to 60 minutes he can walk, and whether he be under saddle or he hooked to a carriage, maybe he's not carrying a second passenger, you're by yourself to start off with. But I think long distance walks are a great thing to limber up a horse and get them started in fitness. And you can have gradually work up to 60 minutes of work with an average speed of, say, 8 kph, which is about half of what you would do in the, more than half of what you would do in a CDE, which your cross-country speed would be 14 or 16 kPa, depending upon what level you were competing at. So you can go out there for an hour and do this little jiggy trot and begin your work that way. And you can start doing this like 2 or 3 times a week, just take it easy at first and don't stress your horse at all. What we're trying to build up is aerobic endurance, and so you're exercising for a prolonged period at a low to moderate intensity. So when you first start out at the barn, your heart rate should be anywhere from 28 to 40 if the horse is normal, and then what you can do is travel 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, calculate your average speed and see how fast you were going, and check the heart rate at those points. Those of you who would have a heart rate monitor, you'd be able to just pick it up and note it without having to stop. But I think that's a really, really good way to figure out what your horse does and how fast his heart rate goes up and also how fast it comes down. You can get these horses out for the first time and they'll go 3 kilometers, and if they're going at just a slow trot, some of their the heart rates will go up to 100 to 160 beats a minute. And the less they go up, the more fit the horse, and the quicker they come back to normal, the more fit your horse is getting. So I just say to start with your distance component first. Start long, slow distances 3 times a week at walk and trot. As the work gets easier for the horse, do 1 long work at the full distance. So, and when I say the full distance, you kind of figure out, hey, what is your goal? If you're a training level or preliminary level driving trial where it's just section E and it's 5K with a couple obstacles in it, you can kind of shoot for that as your distance point. And so you start off at your long, slow distances walking and trotting, and then you speed it up for that same distance, maybe once a week or once every, 10 days or what have you when you first start into this. Then you do two to six shorter conditioning drives at a faster speed. And you'll see that your heart rate may rise up to 70 to 180 beats per minute. And when you first start out doing this, you should give yourself a minimum of a 2-week period. And I think that depending upon the breed of horse that you have, starting with a mini to a draft cross, it depends upon the horse's size and stature, how long you're going to take him to get fit, and also you have to take into consideration what level you're trying to compete at. So I would say that you could probably get, something that has some thoroughbred blood in them with 5 days a week work, fit for a horse driving trial in 30 days. But it may take you 60 or 90 days if your horse was a half draft, because they just take longer to get fit. They have a lot more muscle mass, and they're carrying a lot more weight. So what when you first start out here with conditioning, you're trying to get the horse to supple his muscles up, relax, build fitness gradually, and you're also trying to give him some cardiovascular ability. And the objective is to raise the aerobic capability while still maintaining sufficient anaerobic power and muscle strength for bursts of high-intensity activity. So, well, what's that mean? If you get this horse going long, slow distances, walk and trot, and he's starting to get fit, you're raising up his capacity when you start making him pull a big hill or drive through an obstacle or drive through some sand or drive through some water, things that make him raise his heart rate for a brief period of time and then come back to normal when the stress of the work stops. And then your anaerobic conditioning is your later stage of conditioning, and this is when your horse is reasonably fit and his heart rates, when you have bursts of speed and faster works, may go as high as 170 to 200 beats per minute. And the way you would do this is, like I said before, you're picking up, working your horse at faster speeds, and you're going up a steep hill or through a hazard or through sandy ground or something like this, then you do these bursts of short distance, maybe sprints even. I would call them instead of going at 14 or 12 or 14 kph, now you're going at 15, 16, or 17. And you do that for 10, 15 minutes and bring your horse back to the normal trot that you need for your cross-country event. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
Checking the question log here. I don't see any pertaining to the presentation right now. We have some nice kudos from Nova Scotia and a couple other things. Anybody have a question about the rate and speed and time that you need to spend to get a horse in the original condition? Give them a moment here. So Rich, again, can you just re-summarize about how long on average do you think if your competition is in July, how long it might take you to get to, how long you have to kind of work backwards to get that horse fit enough for a training level competition? An average horse.
I would say still again, it would depend upon the horse. I mean, a pony would get fitter quicker than a draft cross or a warm blood. And a mini would probably get fitter. I really think that you have to go ahead and give that horse at least, to be fair, and I think this is to be fair to the horse so he does it without effort, I think a minimum of 60 days. People may argue with that and say, hey, I can do it faster. And I'm talking about a person who works for a living, that can work their horse 3 to 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. They may not be able to work him for an hour every day. They might be able to get out there for 30 minutes. I think that, your average horse, say, hey, Morgan-sized horse, it probably would take 60 days to get him to fair fitness, where you can go through that training cross country, and the horse do it just like nothing, ever happened, and he just feels like, hey, this is the job that I do every day. And I think at the upper levels, it'll take more time depending upon the horse. But, all of us here probably that are online, or there's very few of them that view us are probably professionals that can work your horse, when you want, for how long, and what have you. And I think that comes into play too, how much effort you can put into training your horse each day.
Okay. Do minis, when you're working with a miniature horse, do minis' heart rate generally run higher than the bigger breeds?
No, not really. I mean, when I've been to vet at some horse driving trials, the minis, if they're fit, they'll come in amazingly low, just like a lot of fit ponies will. Where a big horse would come in with 100 heart rate, this minis coming in with a 70 or 75. So I think that they have a capability of getting very fit, but I think the factor that comes into play is that the mini is a smaller animal. He can't pull as much weight, but he can go long, slow distance to get fit if he was pulling a moderate amount of weight. And I wouldn't knock them for pound for pound. I think they're pretty darn tough. From the veterinary standpoint, I see very, very few minis in the horse driving trials that I've been the veterinarian that they look stressed when they come in from 5 or 6K or what they've ever done. And I've seen horses, Morgans and quarter horses that have looked more stressed. So I really think it's a function of how much time the people have put in training that animal. And I really think pound for pound they've got a lot of guts. And, we have this running joke in my veterinary practice that most of our minis are ornamentals because nobody really trains them or does anything with them. But when you see them actually work, I have a lot of respect for them.
We've got a bunch of questions flooding in right now, and most of them are going to be covered a little later on in the presentation. So if most people, I'll just kind of hang back on some of those. But I did have a good question here. Do you think the color of a horse has any bearing on their rate of recovery? A black horse versus a white horse.
Well, I think that black horses on a hot day definitely will absorb more heat if we're doing a cross-country course in the open. They will definitely absorb more heat. I think if you have a buckskin like in the picture here, they're going to reflect more heat and they're not going to absorb it as much. I think definitely it has some effect. But I also think that if the horse is fit, his body temperature may come up more because he's a dark horse. But if he is fit, he may come down just as quickly as the other horse if they're of equal fitness. But I think that the biggest thing with your dark horses are that I don't think it has anything to do with really anything except sun absorption on a cross-country course. And I think, for example, if you have a really tough Section A on a marathon and they have to do a walk section in the blazing sun, I think those horses that are black will cool out slower because they're absorbing more sun heat than the buckskin would. And it's kind of an obvious thing like wearing a black sweater or a white sweater. One is more reflective and one absorbs more sun. So I think, but if the horse is fit, they should be able to tolerate it.
Okay. All right, I think a bunch of the questions will be covered a little bit later on, so I think we could move on to the next section.
Okay. Now we'll get on to talking about the duration of your higher speeds or your intense work. What you want to do is control the amount of high-speed work or intense work you do to minimize risk or injury due to fatigue or overloading. And the reason I say that is if you were a runner yourself, a marathon runner, as you got tired, your legs wouldn't be as strong. You wouldn't be able to run up a hill or climb a steep bank. Your legs would kind of be a little bit tired, and they wouldn't have the power to do what they need to do. And this is what happens to horses. They become fatigued. happens to racehorses all the time. They start to get tired. They still keep going at that higher speed, and they end up injuring tendons or ligaments or joints. So I think that, before you attempt the high-speed work, you have to be pretty well convinced that, hey, my horse can go out at a normal, say 8 to 14K trot and be comfortable when he's done and over with it, and then I think you're ready for picking up the speed. So I think having the horse somewhat on the road to fitness minimizes your risk of injury due to fatigue or overloading. And I think that picking up speed and training to be able to take that intense work, I think, is uphill gradients are best, like kind of smooth rolling hills, not 45-degree grades, but something around a 10 to 20-degree grade, kind of rolling, and they do really best because they make the horse work a little bit, and then you can come down the other side and slow down a little bit and then repeat it again. What you're basically trying to do is load the cardiovascular and respiratory systems without high stress to the bones and joints. So, you kind of want the horse to be on the road to where you think he can handle the work before you really pick up the speed. Respiratory conditioning. Your rate and depth of breathing in a horse is controlled in part by chemoreceptors, which are in his brain, which respond to levels of oxygen in his blood or her blood, depending upon male or female horse, carbon dioxide, and arterial pH. Your blood becomes more acid or more alkaline, depending upon those factors. As your respiratory rate increases, your oxygen level decreases, your CO2 increases, and your pH decreases. So what the horse's response to this is breathing harder, taking deeper breaths, taking in more air, consequently getting more oxygen. And the fitter the horse is, the easier it is for him to use the oxygen that he gets to make all his body functions work properly. As far as respiratory conditioning, most horses' respiratory rate should be anywhere from 12 to 20. They can be as low as 6 or 7 in ponies. I see that a lot of times. They'll be, 8 at rest before they do any work, but they can go as high as 180 beats breaths per minute. The whole thing in conditioning these horses, whether it be respiratorily or cardiovascularly, is when the exercise stops, the horse's respiration will settle down. Say it started out as 180, and you stop for 5 minutes. That horse's respiration should start to drop to 100, then drop to 60, and go down gradually back to normal. And a lot of times in the vet checks, you can tell a fit horse. They'll come in, you'll listen to their heart, or you listen to their lungs, and they'll come in, hey, 120 on the respirations, and as you're listening, it's dropping, and if you listen 2 minutes later, it's already dropped 10 or 20 breaths a minute, and the same goes for the heart rate. So you see this precipitous decline of respiration and heart rate. You kind of can pick up right away whether that horse is pretty fit or not. And most horses will breathe really deep until the oxygen debt is repaired or replaced. So as they get enough oxygen to feel good, then their breaths will become more and more shallow. And another factor, which we'll talk about later, in determining the speed of recovery for respirations is the ambient temperature. Heat and humidity are very, very important as far as affecting even the fittest horse. Respiratory conditioning, some more. If overheating is a problem in some horses, they will pant. The problem with panting is fast and shallow breaths. And panting is a heat exchange mechanism, but it works better in a dog than it does in a horse. Horses need to take those deep breaths to really provide adequate oxygen to the lung tissue, which will help them cool. Panting does not provide adequate oxygen to the lung tissue. It's very, very superficial. They're not deep breaths. So a lot of times we'll see horses come in off across country, and they'll pant. And people will say, hey, my horse pants all the time. Is this abnormal? I would say it's an abnormal mechanism to provide oxygen to the horse to help him cool out, but it's what that horse does. And as long as he doesn't do that for the whole period he's in the vet check, and he gradually goes down to starting to take deeper breaths where he can help cool himself out and get proper oxygen, I think you're fine. But if a horse is panting 15 minutes into the vet check, I think there's probably a problem there. Then we talk about thermoregulation a little bit. The average rectal temperature is 38 degrees centigrade or 100.5. And some horses can be as low as 99, but I would think that most horses don't get much above 101 on a normal day, say 60 to 70 degree temperature, air temperature. But the most important thing about thermoregulation that you have to realize is that during warm-up, when you take this horse out, leave the barn, then you walk your first kilometer, the body temperature rises about 1 degree in about 10 or 15 minutes to get the muscles up to optimal functional temperature. So warming up is very, very important. And if you went 1 kilometer and you took your horse's temperature and it started out as 99 and it was 100, that's totally normal. That body has to heat up that much to be functional in its best mode. And that's why, you know, people harp on, no matter what sport you're training with, is to take that horse out, warm him up for, you know, 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes if that's necessary, just like athletes will warm up before a soccer game or baseball or football game, pretty much for the same reason, because we become a little bit more efficient by raising our body temperature 1 degree. Now, other problems with thermal regulation that come into play is the rate of heat buildup in the horse's body depends upon how long, the duration of the exercise, how many kilometers is he going, the intensity of the exercise. Is it all hills, or is it all pulling through deep sand? The environmental temperature is like one of the most extremely important factors. Is there high temperature, high humidity? Is there wind? Because high temperature, high humidity with wind is better than high temperature, high humidity with no wind. And that's kind of obvious because you know that just like on a hot, humid day, if there's no breeze, we become pretty uncomfortable. So you can imagine a horse coming off course in those conditions, he's going to have a little bit more tougher time cooling out. Also, another thing that's important is hydration status of the horse. How much body water he has in his system, and also is he a big horse or a little horse? A little horse cools out quicker, a big horse cools out a little bit longer, and his body temperature will get a little bit higher. Hair coat's important. If it's, you know, middle of springtime and he still has his winter coat, like some horses actually have now, they need to be clipped to help cool out when the day gets up to 80 degrees. So the other thing to remember about thermal regulation in the horse is that his body temperature peaks about 10 minutes after heavy exercise. So if you get the horse out on a 80-degree day and you go your first 3 kilometers, you're probably going to have, if he's a fit horse and his body temperature, say, goes up in that warm-up to 101, and then normally after a 5K course he's up to 103. Usually 10 minutes into that or halfway through that section, his body temperature will be where it's going to be at the end of it. And the converse works the other way. Once the horse stops, his body temperature should drop back to normal in 10 to 20 minutes. And that's one of the things we look for at the vet checks, that there's this downward trend in the body temperature. The horse may come in at 104, but you check him 10 minutes later and he's down to 103. If he's staying at 104 or going to 105, then we'll have concerns. Anybody have any questions at this point? We still there, Susie?
Yeah, can you describe maybe what it looks like when a horse is panting? Is his mouth hanging open? Is he just shallow breathing? Or what is
They'll
it
just
usually
shallow
look
breathe
like?
very rapidly. They'll kind of almost look like a dog who's panting after he's ran around a lot. They will, you'll look at their flanks, or you'll look at their nostrils, and they'll be flaring very, very rapidly. And there won't be any really deep breaths in there. It's like some horses will, you'll look at them, and this horse may take in, say, 3 seconds, 6 breaths, really, really rapidly, and the other horse would take 3 in that same period of time who was breathing deeply. So it is, very similar to a dog panting. It would be, and you can almost hear them when they come in. They're making a lot more noise more rapidly.
Now, when you have a horse that does pant, is there something that you can do to try and get him to not pant?
Well, I think if it's from the horse being not fit, I would say that there's, a lot of things you can do is go back to the drawing board and start, doing more long, slow work. But I think that there's a tendency for a couple breeds or members of certain breeds that will tend to do it. My experience is I see, more Morgans do it than ponies do it. And then you'll see big draft crosses do it more than you'll see, say, warm blood crosses do it. So I think it might be breed related. And I think that if you have spent the time conditioning the horse and, say he pants a lot, but his body temperature doesn't get really, really high, and his body temperature comes down at the vet check quite rapidly, and his panting ceases quite rapidly, then I would think that you probably can't do anything about it. But I think you have to know your horse, and I think a lot of competitors come into the vet check and will say, hey, my horse is a panter, he does this all the time. And I think that's important to know, that you figured it out at home before you get to the competition.
Now, is there, from a veterinary standpoint, is there a temperature that a horse gets to that you're kind of like, okay, he's at 103, we're starting to get concerned, 104? What is the temperature where you're like, this horse is in trouble?
Well, it really depends on, okay, if it's a 50-degree day and we've got a horse that comes in at 105, whether he be big or small horse, we kind of raise an eyebrow at that because we would be wondering if this horse is really fit. But if it was a day that the heat and humidity, like say anywhere from June, July, August, September, the competition, the Laurels in Pennsylvania has had some really hot, humid days, and we've had plenty of horses come in at 105. So we've kind of just, advised the owners to get water on them and cool out their horses, and we recheck those horses and they come back down quite rapidly. So I think that, we'd look at the day and we'd look at how fast the horse's response to cooling are. And it's not unusual in the foreign hands for the wheelers to come in at 105 and a half and 106. And usually you'll, the first couple times you do those vet checks and you see those horses come in at that temperature, even on a day that's, in the 80s or so, you'll see them by the time they're ready to go back on course, they might be 103. So it's just a function of the level of the work that they're doing, pulling that carriage through the obstacles and up and down hills. But I think the fact that, in 5 minutes you start to see that this horse's respiratory rate, his heart rate, his temperature, all of those things start to come down. I think that's the most important thing. It's objective. You have to look at it and say, what do we see, and what's the response to rest in this horse? But, if you're into it 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, and he's still got this 105 temperature, and he's still really blowing very rapidly, and his heart rate is still up, then I think the horse is unfit or stressed or what have you. So I think I think it depends on the situation and the day.
Okay, I've just got one more tip. We have Elizabeth Francis gave us a great tip. She said There is a new app available on iPhones called EquiVitals, 7 vitals and how to take them, all with timers and charts. It's worth the 99 cents you got to pay for it to download it. So if you got an iPhone, you can get the information out on an app. All right, let's move on. We're into 7:40 into our session.
Okay, and then we'll talk a little bit about strength training. You know, and this also is breed dependent too. If you're dealing with a mini, we kind of know that he's not going to pull as much weight as a warm blood cross. So we have to kind of look at things and be practical. You know, most mini carriages can carry one person for a single mini, 2 for a pair of minis, and most carriages for single horses can usually carry 2 people. So I think when you first start your strength training and pulling up hills or going through sand or driving through water or something, you should do that by yourself with no weight in the carriage except for, you know, the driver. And then gradually, when you think the horse is getting to the point of fitness, then add some weight. And then you could start off adding a light groom, and then gradually I kind of joke that, you know, you start off with somebody who weighs about 110 pounds soaking wet, and then you work it up to a person who weighs 150, you know, 160 pounds. If you're dealing with a bigger horse, like, say, Morgan, quarter horse, warm blood cross. So you want to add weight to the carriage about 30 to 50% over the competition weight, what you would be going out on course, and just do a, you know, a short country work with that, you know, 3 to 5 kilometers with that horse pulling that extra weight, and that's some strength training. Pulling up hills with, you know, your normal groom or the carriage and the driver, that's some strength training. And also by varying the traveling surface is some strength training. And you know, deep ground, water, which, you know, probably most people don't have too much access to be able to drive to a lot of water, but those are things that make the horse pull a little bit harder and work a little bit harder, and you don't want to do them for tremendously long distances. You just want to do bursts of effort to build up his strength. And then I think another thing that's really important is when you think the horse is fit and you prove to yourself the horse is fit by knowing that, hey, you can go make your calculated time for, say, 5 kilometers like you'd have to do in the event, and you take his, you know, heart rate, respiratory rate, and body temperature, and you look at his whole demeanor, and he's able to do that. After you've done that for a couple weeks, you don't have to push for more distance and a faster speed. If you've reached what your level has to be for that event that you're doing, the level you're doing, then you can kind of back off this horse a little bit and hold him at that plane. And I think that one of the most important things that, you know that I see eventers in my practice and some endurance horse people have made the mistake is working the horses very hard, too close to the competition. And you want to taper that workload prior to the competition to allow glycogen storage and muscles to be replenished. You want to build up some of those reserves of energy sources. So you kind of want to take it easy a little bit that last week just before the competition. And then you want to do other things to make the horse, you know, bend a little bit and be much more supple, and probably dressage under saddle, driven dressage, large and small circles, you know, serpentines, things that make the horse, you know, use himself better and work off his hind end, depending upon the level of ability of that horse that it's going to compete at. I think that's really, really, really an important thing to do. And then going back to what I said before, a good warm-up and cool down is one of the best things you can do. And then we'll talk about passive suppling. Those are basically stretching exercises before you put your horse's harness on. He's in the cross tie, you pick up his back leg like the blacksmith does, stretch it out behind him, stretch it forward, take his front legs and pull them out in front of you, pull them behind him, you know, bend his neck to either side, stretch his neck up and down. They don't seem like much, and you know, people kind of think, oh, it's, you know, it's a big horse, really. Can I get him to stretch? Yeah, I think it's possible. Just like people stretch before they, you know, get out on a course and do what they're doing. I think it does help. And if the horses are well trained or relaxed and they're easy to get along with, they usually allow you to do those things pretty comfortably. So I think it's a good adjunct to you know, making horses feel comfortable before you put the tack on them. And peaking and tapering, like say if someone was going to do a training level test, you know, from my veterinary perspective, I say a low-level horse 5 days prior to that competition could be there and be backed off completely and just do maybe a little bit of dressage practice or something he can, you know, kind of back off on his cross country. You know, upper level horses, I think they can decrease their long, slow work because they know their horses could make the distance at a given speed, and then they can add speed work 2 to 3 weeks before the competition. I think another thing that's really important is allow the horse's body to be fully hydrated, make sure he's drinking well, and like I said before, you want this horse to have a little bit of time off from heavy work because he wants to be fed well going into that competition, and you want his body to have extra stores of glycogen, which is an energy component that I'll need for doing the competition. And the week before the competition, make sure he is fed very, very well, and we'll get into that in a little bit here. And so peaking and tapering, the reason for doing that is as you get closer to the competition, you want to exercise, you know, daily, but decrease the level of work. And what happens there is it allows any minor tissue damage to heal before you get to your competition. You know, say you were 10 days out and you did a really stress day, and you might have done, say, 10 kilometers, you know, with interspersed with walks in between, and you know, your horse gets a little stiff behind. Doing just easy work for the days coming up to the show allows for any of that minor tissue damage to heal. And then a thing that I have about peaking is, you know, from the veterinary standpoint, what we see is after a fitness peak, let the horse down slowly over a 2 to 3 week period. If this horse has been steadily doing competitions and he's as fit as he can get and he's really been working hard, my suggestion from experience with horses who have been in that type of situation, just dumping them out in the field and forgetting about them for 2 weeks is not a good thing, because this horse is used to going out there and really working hard every day, and they'll have some actual biologic issues in their body with all of a sudden being dropped and not working. So I think that if he's going to be really laid up for a while after he's reached the fitness peak, I think, you know, he should go on a couple of trail rides or little easy walks or something for a 2 week period while you let him down. Unless he's got an injury or something, I really think that's important, and especially trying to prevent horses from getting muscle injuries and tendon injuries. And then if you're trying to get ready for another competition, but you've reached a peak and you've got a couple weeks or maybe a month to get ready for the next one, you want to stay at a low workload until you're about halfway to your next fitness peak, and then increase your work again. And, you know, this is just my experience as a veterinarian and my experience training a horse myself. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have quite a few. Talking about when you were talking about adding 30 to 50% of weight, is that just the people weight or the weight of the carriage? You know, because normally in this particular person's situation, they have about 300 pounds of carriage, and then normal crew of, you know, driver and groom is about another 250, 300 pounds. Where would you kind of factor that in for them?
Well, I guess I would start out with the person that's driving in the carriage. So yeah, say your single horse carriage, I think is probably like, I think, what do they think? They probably get up to like 420. You know, they might between 350 and 420, and a pony carriage I think might be around 300. And you know, don't quote me on that, but I think that, you know, first when you do your cross country works, if it's possible and it's safe to do, and your horse is sensible and you won't get into any trouble without having a passenger, I think just you and the horse and the carriage are the way to go. And then gradually start instituting somebody riding on the back of the carriage. And, you know, if it's a reasonable sized horse, a reasonable sized normal person could be the one that you use to start off with. But if you just want to build a little bit more strength, and I'm not talking about pulling the horse up hills, but maybe take a bigger person out, or another 30 or 50 pounds of weight on that carriage. And some people have put a bag of feed, they put a weight, plus that groom who may weigh, say, 125 pounds, just up the weight a little bit so that the horse has to pull a little bit more, and that just gives them a little bit of strength training. I'm not saying overload the horse at all, but you can use people of varying weights, and if you want to do one day, you know, and you have your brother, one who weighs 180 pounds, the other one who weighs 115 pounds, well, use the 115-pounder most of the time, but once every 10 days, go out with a brother who's heavier. Just because I think that really gets the horse used to, hey man, there's somebody behind me that's, you know, a little bit heavier, I've got to work a little bit harder. And before you do that, you have to know that the horse is fit enough to take it. And you don't just go and do that in your first 2 weeks of training.
Okay, let me go on to another question here. Could you explain anhydrosis?
Anhydrosis is a horse who will not sweat, okay? And the problem is there's two types of anhydrosis. There are horses that just are plain non-sweaters, that they have a physiologic problem in cooling out their body. And those horses very, very, very often are difficult to manage. Then the second anhydrosis horse that you'll have is a horse that's becomes a non-sweater when the heat humidity index reaches a certain point. There are certain horses that the humidity could be 70% and the temperature could be 90 degrees, and they'll totally function well and they'll totally sweat very well. But when that humidity gets up in the 90% humidity, or that they call it the heat index of, you know, like 105 and 110, like we've had some times in the summer, those horses completely shut down physiologically as sweaters. And once the temperature drops back down and the humidity drops back down, you could perfectly compete those horses without a problem. So the one that is a non-sweater virtually at any ambient temperature is a real problem, and some of them can be managed by diet, feeding different types of protein and fat levels, feeding them special electrolytes. I think that type of anhydrosis is very, very rare. I think that those horses, you don't see them as much in the warm blood or Morgans or quarter horses, the types of horses that, and ponies like we're dealing with in driving. What we see more is the one that is stressed and becomes a non-sweater based on the environmental temperature and humidity.
I think we can move on to the next section of the presentation.
Okay, heat dissipation. Okay, and this, you know, this will go into a little bit about the sweating of horses. exercise, obviously, produces heat. Dissipation of that heat is most important, and it happens by evaporation. And sweat facilitates evaporation, which leads to high water and electrolyte losses. So what happens when your horses sweat, which is an important thing for them to do, is they lose some water. And just want to go into a little bit of a important point about water consumption in horses. If you take an idle horse on a cool day, who's really, say a cool day being in the 60s, 50s or 60s, that horse will drink 4 gallons a day of water, 28 liters. But then you take an idle horse on a hot day, and he might drink 80 liters, 9 to 10 gallons minimum. So they figure out that, hey, I need more water, and they drink it. And so you have to be cognizant of the fact that you have to monitor their water consumption, see how much they're drinking, and some horses truly are better drinkers than others, and you have to help stimulate their drinking efforts. So the more the horse exercises, he increases his consumptive need for water. And when you're looking at a horse who's sweating and trying to figure out how much fluid is this guy losing or this mare losing, it's hard to estimate. But some of the ways that, without doing blood work, are to look at a horse and grab a hold of the skin on the side of his neck and kind of put it between your index and thumb and kind of pull it out a little bit, and we call it tenting of the skin. That skin should immediately, in a hydrated horse, return back to the flattened against his neck. If you pull that skin out and hold it, and you count to, say, 1001, 1002, and it takes to go back, then he's probably 5% dehydrated. If it takes 3 seconds, then he might be 7% dehydrated. If it takes about 5 seconds, then he might be 10% dehydrated. So you can kind of guess that by skin tenting, how much, water has your horse lost. And it works great in young and middle-aged horses, but in old horses you can be fooled by that and think they're more dehydrated than they actually are, because their elasticity of their skin is not as good as in the younger horse. So I think it's a tool that you can use when your horse comes in from a cross-country work on a hot day and he's really sweating, is to kind of pull on that skin and see how fast it goes back to normal. If it's 5% or less, he can compensate for that on his own. If it's 7 or 10%, then he'll need veterinary intervention to help him out. Another thing about fluid loss in a horse is that weight loss during exercise is about 90% water. So, and you have to remember that a horse's body is about 65% water. So let's just think about some horses that we know. A fox hunter, if he goes out for 3 hours of steady going, and they run a couple fox and they do a lot of hills up and down, he can lose 24 to 100 pounds of weight. And that actually 90% of that would be water. And then same with an endurance horse at 50 miles, they might lose 22 to 88 pounds of body weight, and it's mostly water. So we have to recoup this after the competition. Even a thoroughbred after a good gallop can lose 10 to 15 pounds. And the thing about equine body water, most of it's intracellular. That means it's inside the muscles, it's inside the cells, it's inside the organs. Some of it's extracellular, and most of that is in your blood plasma. And that's a large part of your horse's blood volume is your blood plasma, and it's your extracellular water pool. So what happens in a horse who becomes dehydrated or is becoming dehydrated, what he tries to do is pull intracellular water from his muscles, from his intestine, from his cells into his bloodstream to keep up his blood pressure, to keep up his blood volume, keep up his plasma volume. But if he does not have that reserve of water in his tissues, then his blood pressure will go down, He'll become dehydrated. He'll lose blood flow to his muscles. He'll dehydrate. He'll sweat less, and his body temperature will go up. Now, when horses sweat, they'll lose a lot of electrolytes: calcium, sodium, chloride, potassium. They'll lose protein, and they'll lose trace minerals. If you see horses that really get really foamy and a lot of white on them, on their legs and chest and rump and belly after they do a good work cross country or what have you, that's due to a protein called latherine that is mixed with your electrolytes on their skin. And some horses have more of it than others, and they look like they're more stressed. But as long as they're doing well on their temperature, pulse, and respiration, that's totally normal physiologic happening for that particular horse. And this chart just goes into the volumes of electrolytes that can be lost in periods of time, and they're pretty phenomenal along with the water. So when a horse heavily sweats, it leads both to electrolyte and water loss. And what happens when we get this electrolyte imbalance? Well, we get an acid-base imbalance in the body. We'll get muscle cramping. We'll get tying up. We'll get thumps, which is asynchronous diaphragmatic flutter, where when the horse takes a breath, you'll see his diaphragm pump at the same time, and that's due to a calcium imbalance. We'll see them less. They'll sweat less, and they'll retain more body heat and be stressed. So the strange thing about horses is their thirst response and desire to drink is a little bit weird compared to a human. In humans, if we lose a little bit of sodium, we're attracted to drink more water. But in a horse, as he loses more sodium, he loses the response to drink. And it's a really weird thing, because if you go ahead and supplement these horses in their bloodstream with sodium afterwards, and immediately they'll start drinking again. So they really, really are a little bit different than people as far as their urge to drink when they have an electrolyte loss. Do we have any questions at this point? And
yeah.
there's a little mini working cross country.
Do you agree with the theory of electrolyte loading prior to an event?
And I'm going to get into that in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of doing that.
All right. There's another question here that I think we can all relate to. You know, back in the early days of horsemanship, when we were all in Pony Club, we were told not to give a horse water when they were hot. Is the same principle still hold true now with more information?
Well, a lot of research in hydrating horses and keeping cooling out horses was done at Atlanta prior to the Atlanta Olympics, because we were really worried about how horses would be stressed there, and that kind of poo-pooed any of the old theories that came off the racetrack trainers and things like that. Yes, I think a horse can drink water in small amounts, half gallon to a gallon. It doesn't need to be ice cold. What you're just trying to do is get that horse hydrated again. So yes, if he drinks a small amount when he comes into the vet check, that's perfectly okay. Some horses will get a little bit stomach crampy and gulping a lot of cold water very rapidly, but water from tap without ice in it or anything like that would probably be okay in 99% of the horses that are reasonably fit and don't have any medical problems.
Okay, I think we can continue on with the presentation.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about how do you get horses to drink better or to drink water. You have to give them access to forage, hay or grass. Okay, that is the most important thing. You will never have a horse that competes in driving or endurance or any of these sports where there's a lot of sweating and a lot of physical work if they're just a horse who wants to eat grain and not eat any hay. And the reason for that is and I'll get into in the next slide or two, is that hay, once it gets into the cecum of the horse, it ferments, attracts water, and sits there, and it's a big 50-gallon vat of water that's a reserve for that horse to pull as he needs it. So as he's going through the course, and especially with endurance horses who go over a longer period of time than a driving horse, they have a place to get water from without having to go to the bucket and drink. So having hay in the gut, mixed with water, being fermented in the cecum is really, really important. Other things that are important is that some horses are great drinkers no matter where you take them. I think that some people have flavored their water at home and taught their horses how to drink the flavored water, and then they go ahead and take that same flavoring and take it to the horse show, or they take some buckets of water or tanks of water from their own farm and add them to the water at the horse show, or start off with the water they bring from home. Endurance people seem to get most horses to train to drink very, very well by leading them up to water troughs when other horses are ready to drink, and they bring theirs alongside of them, and they kind of teach the other horses to drink. Holding buckets up for them sometimes helps them, get an interest in drinking. You kind of have to try every trick in a book to keep your horse drinking, and you kind of have to figure it out beginning at home. But I think as far as keeping horses hydrated, I think your pre-event feeding practices are very, very important. And you want to feed them a diet that maximizes water intake and retention. And as I said, dry matter, hay, leads to greater water consumption. The better the quality hay, the better he's going to drink water. You need to have a mineral block available for him, or put electrolyte supplements in his feed. And because all of these things can be retained in that large intestine for quite a number of days if he's hydrated pretty well before he leaves. At the event, you can kind of teach your horse, as you start out at training and you go to advances, kind of train your horse to have a drink in the vet check after the walk section. Electrolyte paste can be helpful, but it's only if your horse drinks some at the rest. And the reason being is that if you have a dehydrated horse who's lost a lot of water and you give him electrolytes, okay, you offset that balance of electrolytes in that horse's body as he absorbs them, and he does not have enough water to balance out that electrolyte balance, and he might actually try to get rid of those electrolytes more in his urine and move fluid to his bladder where we don't want it to be. We want it to be in his circulation. So I don't recommend anybody giving a horse electrolytes at any vet check unless that horse has drank water when he's gotten there first. If he drinks a bucket of water or, a couple liters of water, then I think that electrolyte paste is appropriate. Because if the horse is really stressed out and is lacking a lot of body water, you can kind of send him into a little bit of electrolyte disturbance. I guess the question was if a horse could get electrolytes before the competition, and I think, yeah, mixed with his feed, providing he's a good drinker, is a way to do it. But if you have a horse that absolutely is a horrible drinker, I personally, from the veterinary experience, have seen a couple issues where these horses dehydrated a little bit more and their electrolyte balance was pretty out of whack. So feeding on competition day, the old theory was to starve your horse the day of competition, and it came from the thoroughbred racetracks. They wanted the horse to have an empty gut because they thought they would run faster. But, actually the current theory is for most competition horses is to feed a small meal of hay and grain about 4 hours prior to the start of competition or a long drive. And I think that, we're feeding that cecum, we're giving the horse some energy. With the grain meal, the cecum is going to accumulate water with that hay, and the body's going to have some reserve. And horses who are good hay eaters are usually good water drinkers. Veterinary issues in a dehydrated horse. We talked about administration of water with or without electrolytes already. Most of the time when the horse is stressed out and he's clinically dehydrated, say 7% to 10%, the veterinarian will give a balanced IV solution, or if he's not that dehydrated, we may give oral electrolytes mixed with water by stomach tube. Another thing post-event that's really, really important is to monitor your horse carefully right after the event for a day or two. You want to make sure he's eating well, drinking well, acting well, because he was stressed at that event, he traveled some possibly, and he might not go back to his normal self for a few days, and you really have to be on top of it, because if he's not drinking or he's not eating well, I think that you have to have a discussion with your veterinarian. If you have a long trailer trip home, I usually recommend people that if you get off that marathon course at or it's one of these one-day shows and you got a trailer 3 or 4 hours and the horse has really worked hard for the first time that season, kind of let him walk around a little bit, eat some grass, cool out, give him 45 minutes to an hour before you load him on the trailer, because trailering itself is not innocuous. Transportation can be a dehydrating experience on its own, and transporting a dehydrated horse may lead to another problem like colic. And it happens very, very commonly. We see a lot of show horses that come back, and Sunday night we're getting a call for a horse gets off the van at home and he's pretty colicky. And most of the time when we run blood on those horses, they are reasonably dehydrated. So how do you prevent overheating? Basically, you want to look at your horse and figure out how much work will a horse do, and how strenuous will it be above and beyond what he has done in the past. So you kind of want to mimic the work at home that he's going to do at that event. And if you can duplicate it and he doesn't come in stressed, you're probably not going to have a problem at that event. Now, how hot it will be, and has your horse been trained to acclimate to the heat, that heat load is going to be the thing that makes the difference, because we can't always mimic, all of us have jobs, and you might work your horse in the morning at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the evening. I recommend at least once or twice taking that horse out for his normal work on a hot day, when the humidity and temperature are up a little bit. Maybe you don't work them as hard as you do normally, but let them get some exposure to that heat and humidity. So if that occurs at the event, you kind of could predict how this horse is going to act. And if you have an idea of his pre-work and post-work body temperatures and his pre- and post-work heart rate and respiratory rates, you can kind of figure out that, hey, I think my horse can handle it. Or maybe I don't think he's going to handle it if it's hot. So you can know how to adjust how hard you're going to work that horse if you have a hot day, humid day at that event. And all of it boils down to, again, knowing your horse and how fit your horse is. Cooling a hot horse. In the old days, nobody ever thought of putting cold water on them. They thought it was one of the most outrageous things, and that the horse would tie up and end up in more trouble. But when we did a lot of research for the Atlanta Olympics and just prior to that, people figured out that, hey, this was the thing to do, especially with your big, heavy-bodied horses, because their inner core temperature was really warm, and their surface, when you put just tepid water on them, there's no cooling gradient for that heat from deep in the body to evaporate and move out. So you want to put copious amounts of cool water on the horse. You want to scrape it off. You want to use, if the horse is a big horse and he has a tendency to get hot, use ice-cooled water in large volumes. Alcohol mixed with that water is beneficial because it helps sweat and water evaporate. And try to get your horse in the shade, in the breeze, or in front of a fan, and monitor his temperature. And I think that, as far as using real cold water on a horse, I think that you don't want to do it for the first time at the competition. I think you need to try it at home and see how he responds to cooler water, and so that he doesn't really try to jump out of the carriage when your groom's putting the water on him first time at the vet check. I think that all of these things, basically you think about them and you say, hey, they're common sense. And I think you just have to work really hard at it. And if you see that horse is hot, then everybody who's available to help you in your crew, your navigator, your friend or whoever's there at the horse show, everybody needs to help get water on that horse and scrape it off. And then some people even make ice blocks up that they'll put in gloves and they'll rub them on the jugular vein and the big veins in the hind legs, and that also works to cool the body core temperature too. And that's especially really important in the bigger breeds of horses such as warm bloods and draft crosses. So I think, in a nutshell, I think a lot of it is common sense. I think it's knowing your horse. And I think without proper care and conditioning, you'll have a carriage, but no horse to pull it.
Okay, we have
I have some more questions.
Yeah, we have a few more questions, and since we got a little bit of time here, we have about 12 minutes left. There is one here that said, what is the normal intake maybe for a miniature horse? Should we see an increased water intake in my mini as he becomes more fit?
Not particularly as the horse becomes more fit. They're going to, if they sweat more, getting more fit, they're going to increase their intake. But if they're not doing enough work to burn up body water or sweat and lose body water, you're probably, not going to see that increased consumption. But I think it doesn't only, go to minis. If you don't raise the level of work where that horse has to, work harder, evaporate more water, I think that you're not going to see that increased consumption. So yes, as he gets fitter and he sweats more, yes, he'll drink more. And I think that I think you just have to read it again as to the level of work and the level of fitness that you're doing. Now, if he doesn't, if he sweats like crazy and he's all lathered up and doesn't drink any more that night and the next night or what have you, then I think that I'd be a little bit concerned whether he be, a horse or a mini, that, we need to figure out a way to increase his water consumption. I think that's really the most important thing, is having that reserve of water in that horse's body, because if he gets into a condition where the heat and humidity is higher than normal, he's got some reserve to spare and he can fix himself. It's the horse who's, got an empty cecum, which is a little bit dehydrated already, and he's trying to pull more body water from there. He's the one that runs into trouble getting dehydrated, colicky, really stressed, inability to cool out. So I would think, yes, as you get him fit, providing he's sweating, you'll see an increase in the water consumption.
What about, can you just kind of touch on again the major areas on the horse's body that you want to concentrate on when you're putting the water on and scraping it off? So where are some places to concentrate on? It's kind of difficult when you're working around the harness, Yeah,
I think that the neck, the sides of the, flank and rump, the big gluteal muscles, your haunches, the legs up in the groin, places where there's, blood vessels very superficial to the skin. And, you'll see some of these horses that, they'll come in, a lot of blood vessels are dilated in their skin, and over a period of time, as you cool them down or the competition ends and you put the horse back in the stall, the blood flow to those blood vessels become less obvious. So I really think any of the massive tissues on the horse, whether it be a mini or a big horse, it's going to be your rump, your back, and your neck, your biggest muscle mass, which has to cool out to the core.
Okay, I've got a bunch of feeding questions. These are kind of good. There was a question here about should you feed grain if you're going to trailer your horse? Is it better to maybe wait for the grain when he gets to the competition, or do you grain him before you leave? Do you have any feelings on that?
Well, I think if the horse is going to leave the, the farm, most horses get fed, say, twice a day. If you're going to load the horse on a van and, at 4 o'clock in the morning and he normally gets fed at 7 and he's going to travel for 12 hours on the van, then I might skip that grain meal. But if he's going to leave at 6 o'clock and he normally gets fed at 7, I might feed him a little bit earlier and let him, eat a little bit of hay before he goes. So, he has more of a tendency to retain some water in his gut. And then he just has a little bit more energy for the trip. But, if you're going to be traveling, and I'm not going to tell you to stop on the road to feed him any grain, I think, having a small hay rack in front of him is okay. I think, it depends on the horse, and if you know your horse real well, if he's a super good drinker, then you can hang hay in the trailer. But if he's a horse who doesn't drink anything on a trip, I think it's almost better to have a minimum amount of hay with those horses if you're traveling a long trip. If you know that he's one that comes off the trailer, and I personally had 2 horses that were that way, you put them in a stall at the horse show, the first thing they do is look for their bucket. They're banging their bucket if it doesn't have water in it. And those horses can consume some hay on the trip. But, horses who, come the next morning at the showgrounds, you're still looking, ooh, he didn't drink any water. Those horses, I would be light on the hay during the trip. I'd probably let them get their hay load and drink well before you even think about putting them on the van like the day or 2 before.
Do you have an opinion on using beet pulp to try and get more water into a horse?
I think beet pulp is a good energy food. I think it will get some moisture into them. If it's soaked and really beet pulp doesn't need to be soaked overnight. It just needs to be soaked for a short period of time till it expands. And it does contain some water, but it has to be pretty wet and soupy to give them extra water. I don't think it's harmful. I think it's a good source of energy. And I think that it's a good way of getting water into them. I think that if that works for somebody to get water into their horse, then I say by all means continue doing it. But per se, I don't think it's attractive of water, because once it's soaked up the water and swollen to the the maximum, when it goes to the gut, it doesn't attract any more water to try to accumulate there. It'll just ferment like normal grain will in cecum.
What about the use of alfalfa pellets in the same kind of situation as water consumption or storage in the gut?
Well, I think the thing about alfalfa,
like Timothy pellets too.
Timothy pellets?
Yeah.
Okay, I would say that alfalfa is a really, really good hay product to feed to horses to make them drink. And it's very, very rich in electrolytes, it's high in calcium, phosphorus, and horses who are fed a lot of alfalfa are usually really good drinkers because they're stimulated by the electrolytes that are in it. And I remember in the old days when I was first out of vet school working on the racetracks, the trainers would be all worried that these horses that were on a high alfalfa diet would urinate a lot and drink a lot. They'd always think they had something wrong with their kidneys. But, we know better than that. It's just the fact that it has a tendency to stimulate that water drinking mechanism based on electrolytes in it. Now, my problem with alfalfa pellets are that if the horses tolerate eating them without choking, then I think they're fine to feed. But I think some horses do have a problem in swallowing them and chewing them properly. Otherwise, if your horse can tolerate them, I think they're a really, really good thing to feed. And I have some clients that feed them by wetting them, saying to sand and come easier for the horse to swallow. I think Timothy pellets, if I were looking to try to make a horse drink better, I would probably use the alfalfa over the Timothy. Because I think it's just proven over years and years and years of feeding alfalfa that it does make horses drink a lot.
There's a question here that says, I was taught to use the color of the nostril to determine respiratory stress. At rest, normal, near white color. At work, reddish pink. As the horse recovers, more pink, then closer to white. Is this an accurate method of checking their stress?
Well, yeah, I think it is for your individual horse. I think your respiratory rate or your heart rate's a little bit better method because I think that's a little bit subjective. But I think if you know your horse and you can tell by the change in color inside the nostrils, I think that's a fair way if you're used to doing it, to kind of gauge where your horse stands. I think, like I said, the heart rate and respiratory rate are better, but I wouldn't throw that out the window and say, hey, I would not use that. If you know your horse well enough and you kind of correlate the color of that mucous membrane with the way the horse is behaving and how he acts, I think that's really, really important. That's another observation that helps you be a better horseman and a better trainer. And then I guess the only problem with going back to the alfalfa feeding was that some horses who are fed a lot of alfalfa contains a lot more protein, and some of those horses become a little bit stronger and a little bit harder to deal with, and so you kind of have to read your horse as to how much alfalfa are you going to feed him. Some people are turned off by a horse who's more forward, it might have that effect upon your horse because it's just like feeding a higher protein feed. So that's just a word of caution, and you just have to see how your horse fares eating it.
Okay, and one participant said, I use Pedialyte for kids, 1 liter per 10 gallons of water 3 days before the show and at the show. Is this good or bad?
No problem with it. It's an electrolyte. It's a balanced electrolyte supplement. We have even a couple clients that are endurance riders that use Gatorade in the water. They take a 5-gallon bucket and put in one of those big quart bottles of Gatorade. And I think, yeah, it is electrolyte supplementation, and the horse is drinking the water and getting these electrolytes at the same time. So, yeah, I think it's a perfectly good method of continuing to do, especially if your horse is, doing very well and not having had any stress issues. I wouldn't change the program.
We learned a lot today, that's for sure. And I've got one other comment here. Would you suggest that maybe you start tracking your standing PRs and temperatures so you kind of get a base of data about your horse?
Yeah, I think that, and this is an important thing to do that you find out sometimes about these horses, that my personal horse in winter is going to have a different heart rate and respiratory rate than she does in the summer. And, their respiratory rate may be increased more because they're trying to breathe deeper and cool better and things like that. So, yeah, I think you should do your resting heart rate and resting respiratory rate and temperature rate a couple times during the year, so you know that, hey, depending upon the competition season you're in, hey, what's his baseline or what's her baseline? And then, after she comes in from your 5K work, how high is her heart rate? How high is his respiratory rate? How high is the temperature? And then 10 minutes later, take all those things again and see if they're coming back down to normal. And the biggest thing you're searching for is this trend of dropping very, very rapidly of all of those factors. And the temperatures is going to be the slowest thing to drop. Your heart rate and respiratory rate will come down a lot of times before the body temperature comes down to normal. But as long as they all show the downward trend and the horse feels comfortable, I think that you should feel comfortable with going on and increasing the level of work and thinking that your horse is fit. I was pretty amazed that my personal horse this year, she spent the winter in South Carolina working pretty much on the flat without any hills, but she did get worked extensively. And then when she went into competition in North Carolina with some hills, I was really amazed how she tolerated those hills without a problem. So, I think, if you don't have hills to work on, and when you have long, slow miles to get that horse fit, I think it really can pay off if you do have to stress it a little bit, because they do have that endurance power to continue with.
All right, we're at 8:30, so I think we probably have to get people tucked back into bed. And I just want to say thank you so much to Rich for putting together this presentation for us and for sharing all his knowledge. We will have this webinar. It'll be recorded, so it'll be posted up on the website in a few weeks, so you can listen to it again or share it with a friend of yours that you think may benefit from this information. So once again, thank you, Rich, very much, and look forward to having you all back again for Shelley Temple on the 28th. So thank you very much. And